Hello you guys, people out there, and welcome to the very first video on the rocket up. My name is Philip, and today I'm going to talk about Starship serial number 9's explosion and what might have caused it. So let's don't waste any time and dive right in. Already 3 days ago, precisely on the 2nd of February 2021, Starship serial number 9 soared off from suborbital pad B at the Boca Chica launch site in Texas to its first test flight. It was supposed to reach an altitude of 10 kilometers, what it did, and then returned to the landing site to perform the first ever Starship flip landing, which didn't quite work out as most of you might already know, but, well, the liftoff was picture perfect. The Starship serial number 9 soared off from the pad and, whoa, that rocket launch audio was simply great. I have never heard some audio like this before. It just sounds so violent and powerful. It's crazy. And after the liftoff, Starship turned off its engines one by one, like we had seen it on serial number 8's flight just 2 months before. Right after SN49, that's the serial number of the last Raptor shut down, turned off, Starship SN9 flipped into horizontal to perform the belly flop landing. It simulated the re-entry through the atmosphere and guided itself down back to the pad with aerodynamic surfaces on either side of the vehicle. This phase of the flight looked pretty normal to me, apart from one thing. At the beginning, it looked like SN9 was a bit overshooting and falling too steep, but they corrected it very fast, and I don't think it had much impact on the later outcome of the flight. And then Starship serial number 9 tried to land itself back on the landing pad, and this happened. Not quite what we wanted to see, but I was pretty excited at this moment because RDs are pretty spectacular. I have to admit that, but now the question is what actually went wrong. So let's watch the landing sequence again, this time at 1/4 of the original speed. What we can pretty clearly see is that despite 2 engines being supposed to relight, only one does it. The other one tries to relight but fails. Only a small flame comes out, and then the engine pretty much dies. So one Raptor engine has to try to do the work that normally 2 have to do. So Starship serial number 9 can't correct the flip maneuver and hasn't enough power to slow itself down. And the result is a pretty big explosion. So now the only question is, why did this Raptor malfunction? And I got my own theory on why it happened, because there were some hints during the entire flight of SN9 which could tell us what exactly led to the failure of that one single Raptor engine. And now I'm gonna present you my theory of what exactly happened inside SN9 and led to failure. So here it is. The first thing I recognized, as many others probably did too, was a fire in the upper part of one of the Raptors inside the engine skirt of SN9 during the ascent. You can pretty clearly see it on video. There is some flames coming out of the tip of the engine that has the number 49, so this is Raptor engine SN49. And during the live streams there were many speculations about that this fire might have caused the Raptor engine to fail during the relight for the landing burn, but there's one problem. The fire in Raptor serial number 49 didn't influence the landing at all, because the fire was in SN49, and SN49 is the only engine that wasn't even supposed to relight during the landing burn, because Starship has 3 engines and only 2 are needed, and the third one is SN49. SN49 had the longest runtime of all of 3 engines because it was the last one to be turned off, but it made no difference. The fire was there for likely over 2 minutes and it didn't affect the landing failure at all. So this theory is wrong because the engine wasn't even involved in the failure. due to the placement of the camera inside of the engine skirt of SN9, we know that the only engine that isn't supposed to relight is the one in front, in this case SN49. So if we look at the landing from I think this is the Starhopper cam, you can see that SN49 is the only engine not involved in a failure. But there is another engine. The one that we saw on the video of the fire is right off SN49, right behind it. And this is the engine that failed. So we have to look for a different cause. Another thing that many of you pointed out was there were two pieces of debris falling out of the engine skirt. The first one during the ignition of the landing burn, and the second one later on in the burn. So let's first try to find those pieces in the video footage of the crash. On the footage of the official stream made by SpaceX, the second part falling out the engine skirt is pretty easily to spot. You can see it right there during the landing burn, and this footage is even good enough to say what this part even is. This is a sheet of some kind of thermal protection material that is fixed inside the engine bay of SN9. You can actually see exactly that part that's fallen off earlier on the screenshot of the burning Raptor. It is right there in the top right corner. This is the piece that fell off during landing burn. But there was another part falling off from SN9 before this thermal protection sheet, and this first part is way more interesting. The first part that fell out of the engine skirt of SN9 was pretty clearly visible on the stream of Tim Dodd, aka the Everyday Astronaut, and what you could see it is way bigger and seems to be heavier than the second part, this thermal protection sheet that fell off later during the landing burn, but this first part seems to be made of a different material, or at least be thicker. So what is it? Fact is, we don't know it. We only can speculate about what this part actually is. And here is my theory, what I believe this part to be. This part originates either from the outside of the Raptor, which experienced a failure, or from the inside of the engine bay of SN9, directly next to the Raptor with a failure. And I got this theory because of something I recognized during the landing burn. To show you that thing that I have spotted, we have to pull out some screenshots from earlier today. To be precisely, the screenshots on which I showed you the second part falling out of the engine bay, because you can see something else too on this screenshot. If you look closely to the engine bay, you can see two bright spots somewhere between the engines. And in my eyes, there are only two ways to explain those bright spots. Possibility A would be they're just some exhaust from a running rocket engine which somehow got up there into the engine skirt, or it is possibility B. It is molten metal. Possibility A wouldn't help us at all with examining why SN9 failed, but possibility B would be interesting because molten metal in the top of the engine bay, that has to be some kind of malfunction. If we take a second look at the landing burn of SN9, we clearly see that one of the Raptors is only producing a very small flame. And this means that we never had a combustion in main combustion chamber, otherwise the engine would have lit up. And that means we only had combustion in at least one of the preburners, maybe both. We can't even say if there were only one preburner running or both. And this is really interesting, because if there was only the preburners or even only one preburner running, that means that maybe the torch igniters in the main combustion chamber have failed. This was a theory brought up by many people during the live streams, and I think, yes, it could in fact be that the torch igniters didn't work, but there are two things causing doubt in me that this theory is real, because if the torch igniters failed, why would there be a part flying out of the engine bay, and why would there be molten metal at the top of it? That makes no sense. So I have got a different idea. What could have caused this failure? So what I believe is that in the exact moment SpaceX tried to ignite their Raptor engine, something went wrong in one of the preburners. Maybe there was some kind of explosion or other malfunction which caused one of the pipes in the engine to rupture. A bit of molten metal drips out because the heat is too high for the material, and this molten metal is visible in the engine bay in the later footage. If it really is molten metal, I believe it, I'm not sure, but I think it is. And this would even explain why there is some sheet of metal flying out of the engine bay, because maybe this part was somewhere positioned outside of the reactor and was blown off by the shockwave of a little explosion in the preburner. This has the consequence that the preburner doesn't quite work, and there is not enough fuel and not the right mixture of fuel in the main combustion chamber to ignite the engine. So the main combustion chamber failed. It doesn't produce a stable flame, the engine shuts down, there's only one engine running, and SN9 slams into the ground. This is my theory of what happened. So, what do you guys think? Is my theory the right approach, or am I completely off? Let me know in the comments down below, because I'm really interested in what you think. But one thing is clear, SpaceX has advanced, because it wasn't the same failure that SN8 experienced. The methane header tank clearly worked. This is the most important part. Learning from failures and improving for the next test flight. So hopefully they'll figure out what was the reason. And they fix it until SN10 flies, because I don't want to see a third IUD. And now we are at the end of my very first YouTube video. So you may have noticed that my quality wasn't that good, especially sound quality, because I'm recording this with a $20 stick microphone made of plastic and a smartphone camera. So I hope I can improve that in the future. But if you did like my video, why don't press the like button or even consider becoming one of my first subscribers, because I am going to try to upload one video per week from now on. I hope I can really do this. Oh no, what have I just said? That's it for me for today. Cheers. If you look back at the footage of the landing oh, I think my camera is just dropping.